My brother sold our father's house 3 weeks after the funeral, and I found out from a neighbor's Facebook post congratulating the new owners on their beautiful renovation plans. I read that post 4 times before I understood what it meant. Then I called Marcus, and he didn't even bother to sound surprised that I knew. "It needed to happen, Dana," he said, like he was explaining a weather delay. "The house was just sitting there. Taxes don't pay themselves." I sat down on my kitchen floor, phone pressed so hard against my ear it left a mark, and asked the only question that mattered. Whose name was on the paperwork? He didn't answer. He just said he had another call coming in. That house wasn't just wood and drywall. It was the kitchen where my mother taught me to roll dough before she got sick. It was the porch where my father sat every evening with his coffee, watching the street like it belonged to him. It was the last place that still smelled like both of them, and somebody had sold it without asking me. I didn't cry that night. I got very, very quiet instead. Quiet in a way that scared me a little because I already knew that kind of silence in our family was usually the beginning of something. My name is Dana Whitfield. I'm 38, an architect at a mid-sized firm in Columbus, Ohio. The kind of job where I spend my days making sure other people's structures don't collapse. I should have paid closer attention to my own family's foundation. There are 3 of us. Marcus, 43, the oldest, who owns a struggling used car dealership he's never once admitted is struggling. Renee, 35, the youngest, a stay-at-home mother of 2 who has spent her entire life agreeing with whatever Marcus says, the way people agree with weather forecasts, not because they trust them, but because arguing feels pointless. Our father, Walter Whitfield, died of a stroke on a Tuesday morning in March, sitting in the recliner where he did the crossword every day for 20 years. I found him. I was the one who called 911, the one who rode in the ambulance, the one who held his hand in the hospital hallway while a doctor said words I still can't fully remember. Our mother had passed 6 years earlier. Dad had been alone in that house since, and I visited every Sunday. Marcus visited on holidays. Renee called sometimes. At the funeral, Marcus stood at the podium and gave a beautiful eulogy about family and legacy and keeping Dad's memory alive in everything we do. 18 days later, he sold the thing Dad spent 31 years paying for. The lawyer's office smelled like old paper and burnt coffee. I sat across from Priscilla Ann Ogden, our father's estate attorney, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s who'd handled Dad's affairs for over a decade. I hadn't called her out of suspicion. I'd called her because I needed to understand how any of this was legally possible without my signature. "Your father set up a revocable living trust 4 years ago," she said, sliding a folder across the desk. "It named all 3 of you as equal beneficiaries, but he named Marcus as sole trustee." My stomach dropped. "Sole trustee? Why would he do that?" "Your father told me Marcus was good with numbers." She said it flatly, the way you'd repeat somebody else's bad decision without endorsing it. "A trustee has legal authority to manage and even sell trust property. If your brother followed the trust's instructions, the sale itself could be entirely legal." "Could be," I repeated. "So maybe it isn't." She folded her hands. "A trustee still owes what's called a fiduciary duty to every beneficiary. That means full transparency, fair dealing, and an honest accounting of every dollar. If he sold that house and didn't inform you, didn't split the proceeds according to the trust, or manipulated any part of that process, that's a different conversation." I left her office with one instruction ringing in my ears. Get me a copy of the trust, the closing documents, and every financial statement tied to that sale. That night, my phone buzzed. A text from Renee. "Marcus says we need to talk as a family. Dinner Sunday?" I typed back one word. "Fine." I had no idea that dinner would hand me the first piece of evidence myself. Renee's house smelled like pot roast and air freshener. Marcus arrived 20 minutes late in a car I didn't recognize. A brand new SUV, glossy black, dealer plate still on it. "New inventory," he said when he caught me looking. "Test driving it for a client." I said nothing. I just filed it away. Dinner started civil enough. Renee's kids talked about school. Her husband asked about my latest project downtown. Then, over dessert, Marcus finally addressed the reason we were all sitting there, "Look, I know the house thing feels sudden," he said, cutting into his pie like the conversation was as simple as the dessert. "But somebody had to make the hard calls. I've been handling Dad's affairs for years. You two were never involved in the details?" "I visited him every Sunday for 6 years," I said quietly. "I know the details." "Visiting isn't managing," Marcus said. "There's a difference." Renee shifted in her seat. "Marcus said the market was really good right now, and waiting would have cost us money." "Us. Not the estate, not the trust. Us." "How much did it sell for?" I asked. Marcus wiped his mouth. "420. And my third of that is?" He hesitated just half a second too long. "It's complicated. There were closing costs, repairs, back taxes." "How much, Marcus?" "I'll send you a number," he said, standing to clear his plate. "I don't have the exact figure memorized." I watched him walk to the sink, shoulders tight, jaw set the way it used to get when we were kids, and he'd broken something and needed a story ready before Dad got home. That night, I drove home in silence, one sentence circling in my head like a warning light. He doesn't have the exact figure memorized, because he doesn't want me to see it. 2 days later, the number came. A text, not a call, not even a full sentence. "Your share, $61,000. Will transfer soon. $61,000. Out of a $420,000 sale, split 3 ways. That left barely enough owed to me." I stared at the screen so long, the message blurred. I called Priscilla Ogden the next morning and read her the text. There was a long pause on her end. "Dana," she said carefully, "did your brother ever explain what expenses those numbers reflect?" "No." "Then we need real documentation, not a text message. A full accounting is your legal right as a trust beneficiary. I'm going to send Marcus a formal demand letter today." 3 days later, the documents arrived in a manila envelope on my doorstep. No return address, no note, just paper. I sat at my dining table and went through every page. That's when I found the first thing that didn't add up, the trust amendment. Buried on page 14 was a document titled First Amendment to the Walter J. Whitfield Revocable Living Trust, dated 8 months before my father died. It changed the distribution split from equal thirds to a new formula, Marcus 45%, Renee 30%, and me 25%, citing additional caregiving responsibilities undertaken by trustee. I read the caregiving justification 3 times. Marcus had visited our father maybe 6 times in the last 2 years of his life. I had the calendar entries to prove it. At the bottom of the amendment was our father's signature. Something about it looked wrong. Not fake exactly, but off. My father's handwriting always slanted hard to the left, a habit from being forced to write right-handed as a kid when he was naturally left-handed. This signature slanted right. I photographed the page and sent it to Priscilla that same hour. Her call came back within 20 minutes, and her voice had changed. It was sharper now, focused. "Dana, I drafted every trust document your father ever signed with me," she said. "I have no record of this amendment. It was never filed through my office." My hands went cold. "So where did it come from?" "That," she said, "is exactly what we're going to find out. Don't confront your brother yet, not until we know more." I hung up and sat in my kitchen for a long time, staring at that photograph of a signature that wasn't quite my father's. Somewhere in that slanted, wrong-handed W, I felt the first real crack in the story Marcus had been telling everyone, including himself. 2 weeks passed before the next piece landed in my lap, and it came from somewhere I never expected. My father's old neighbor, Mrs. Kowalski, who'd lived across the street from him for 22 years. She caught me at the mailbox one afternoon, still standing outside what used to be Dad's house, watching a dumpster full of his belongings sit at the curb. "I have something you should see," she said, glancing toward the house like she was worried about being overheard. "My Ring camera. It faces the street, but it catches your dad's driveway too." At her kitchen table, she pulled up footage on her phone from 3 months before my father died. A realtor's car in the driveway. Marcus, walking through the front door with a woman in a blazer, gesturing at the porch, the roof line, the yard, appraising the house, while our father was still alive, still living in it, still completely unaware. "I remember because your dad mentioned it," Mrs. Kowalski said. "He told me Marcus said it was just for insurance purposes." I watched that video 4 times. My father, sitting right there in his living room window in one frame, waving at a man he trusted completely, while that same man walked another woman through his home like it was already inventory. That night, I called Priscilla with the footage. "This changes things significantly," she said. "If Marcus was actively preparing to sell that property before your father died, and that amendment surfaces around the same window, we may be looking at something far more serious than a mismanaged trust." "Like what?" "Like a beneficiary who was planning this long before he had any legal right to." I put my phone down and looked at the dumpster still sitting outside my childhood home, filled with things nobody had asked me if I wanted to keep. Then my phone rang again. Renee's name lit up the screen, and for the first time since the funeral, her voice was shaking. "I need to tell you something," Renee said, "and I need you to not tell Marcus I called." I sat down on Mrs. Kowalski's porch steps, phone pressed to my ear. "I'm listening. He had me sign something last year, a witness signature on some trust papers. He said it was routine, just updating Dad's information. I didn't read it. I trusted him." Her voice cracked. "Dana, was that the amendment? The one changing the percentages?" My throat tightened. "Yes." Silence stretched long enough that I thought the call had dropped. "Dad never signed anything in front of me," she finally said. "Marcus brought me the paper already filled out. I just witnessed a blank line." "Renee, that's forgery. Do you understand that? If Dad never actually signed that document—" "I know," she whispered. "I know what it sounds like. I didn't want to believe he'd do that. He's my brother too." I wanted to feel triumphant. Instead, I just felt tired, the kind of tired that settles into your bones after months of being told you're overreacting about your own life. "Will you say that to a lawyer?" I asked. "Officially?" A long pause. "I need to think." She hung up before I could push further, and for the next 6 weeks, she didn't answer another call. That silence from Renee hurt more than Marcus's arrogance ever did. He'd always been calculating. But Renee was supposed to be the soft one, the one who still sent me birthday cards signed with hearts. Now even she had gone quiet, caught between protecting her brother and doing what was right. I spent those weeks feeling like the outsider in my own family, like the house sale had cut a line straight through us, and I was the only one standing on my side of it. Friends told me to let it go. "It's just money," one said. "Family isn't worth losing over a house." But it was never just money. It was the last thing my father built, and somebody had taken it and lied about why. Then, going through a box of Dad's things Mrs. Kowalski had rescued from that dumpster before I even knew to ask, I found an envelope taped to the underside of an old cigar box. My name in my father's real handwriting, the left-leaning kind on the front. "For Dana, if anything happens to me." My hands were shaking so hard I tore the flap instead of opening it properly. Inside was a single folded letter, dated 2 years before he died. "Dana, if you're reading this, something's wrong, or I waited too long to say this out loud. I love all 3 of you the same, but I've watched Marcus struggle with that dealership longer than he knows I've noticed. And I've seen how he talks about the house like it's already his. I'm keeping a copy of the original trust, the one that splits everything equal, in my safe deposit box at First Merit Bank downtown, box 214. If anything about the paperwork ever looks different than what I'm telling you now, that's the one that's true. I trust you to make it right. You always were the one who paid attention." Dad. I read that letter 6 times, sitting on Mrs. Kowalski's kitchen floor, before I could breathe normally again. My father had known. Somehow, some part of him had known exactly what might happen, and he'd left me the one thing Marcus couldn't rewrite. The next morning I was standing outside First Merit Bank before it opened. It took 2 weeks and a court order arranged through Priscilla to get legal access to that box as a named beneficiary. When the bank officer finally slid it across the table and I lifted the lid, my chest went tight. Inside was the original trust document, notarized, dated, signed with my father's real left-leaning signature, splitting the estate 3 equal ways. No caregiving clause, no 45-30-25 split, just 3 names, 3 equal shares, exactly the way he'd always told us it would be. Priscilla brought in a forensic document examiner named Harold Fung, a quiet, precise man who spent 2 hours comparing both signatures under magnification. "These aren't the same hand," he said finally, tapping the amendment. "The pressure points, the stroke direction, the pen lifts this signature was traced or heavily practiced. It's not a perfect forgery, but it's a deliberate one." "Can you prove that in court?" I asked. "I can testify to it with a reasonable degree of professional certainty," he said. "Combined with a witness statement from your sister and a notary who I suspect never actually watched your father sign anything, yes, this is provable." I sat with that answer for a long moment. Then I made the decision I'd been circling for weeks. "I'm not doing this quietly anymore," I told Priscilla. "File it." Renee finally called me back the week the petition was filed, her voice thin with something between relief and dread. "I got served papers," she said, "as a co-beneficiary. Why am I named in this?" "Because you witnessed the signature," I said gently. "Renee, I'm not trying to bury you. I need you to tell the truth about what Marcus asked you to sign. That's it." Another long pause, longer this time. "He told me if I said anything, he'd stop helping with the kids' tuition," she said quietly. "He's been paying part of it since Mike lost his job." There it was. The leash Marcus had been holding the whole time, disguised as generosity. "Renee, that's not help," I said. "That's leverage." She didn't answer right away. But 3 days later, her lawyer contacted mine. She was willing to give a sworn statement, the whole story, the blank signature line, Marcus's instructions, all of it in exchange for being dismissed from any liability herself. Priscilla agreed immediately. "We don't need to punish her," she said. "We need her truth. That's worth more than any settlement." With Renee's statement, Harold Fung's forensic report, the original trust from the safe deposit box, and Mrs. Kowalski's doorbell footage showing Marcus walking a realtor through the house months before Dad died, we had exactly what Priscilla called an airtight petition for breach of fiduciary duty and trust reformation. The hearing was set for 6 weeks out. Marcus didn't call me once during that entire time. But 2 days before the hearing, he showed up at my office unannounced, standing in the lobby in a suit I didn't recognize, the same nervous energy from that dinner table radiating off him like heat. "Can we talk without lawyers?" he asked. "Just us?" I looked at him for a long moment, remembering every Sunday I'd sat with our father alone while Marcus was too busy, every excuse, every dismissed phone call, every lie stacked on top of another lie. "We're past that, Marcus," I said. "I'll see you in court." The probate courtroom was smaller than I expected, quiet in a way that made every rustle of paper sound loud. Marcus sat at the opposing table in a gray suit, his own attorney whispering to him while he stared straight ahead, refusing to look my way. Priscilla built the case piece by piece, calm and methodical, exactly the way she'd promised. She entered the original trust from the safe deposit box first. Then Harold Fung took the stand, walking the judge through stroke direction and pen pressure and pause patterns until the forgery stopped being a suspicion and became a documented fact. Then came doorbell footage. The judge watched it twice, her expression unreadable, pausing on the frame where my father waved from his window at the man who was already planning to sell the roof over his head. Then Renee testified. Watching my sister sit in that witness box, hands folded so tightly her knuckles went white, was harder than anything else in that entire process. She described the blank signature line, the instructions not to read it, the tuition payments that came right after, and stopped right when she started asking questions. "Did your brother ever tell you what document you were witnessing?" Priscilla asked. "No," Renee said, voice barely above a whisper. He said it was routine paperwork. I trusted him. Marcus's attorney tried to frame the sale as a legitimate business decision by a trustee acting within his authority. But authority built on a forged amendment isn't authority, it's theft wearing a suit. The judge's ruling came 2 weeks later, delivered in dense legal language that Priscilla translated for me over the phone in plain English. The amendment is voided, she said. The original trust stands. Marcus is removed as trustee, effective immediately, and a neutral court-appointed trustee will oversee final distribution. He's personally liable for the shortfall between what he sent you and your true equal share, plus interest for the time it sat in his account. And Dana, the court, referred the forgery finding to the county prosecutor for review. I sat down slowly on my kitchen floor, the same spot where I'd first heard about the sale all those months earlier. What does that mean for him? I asked. It means a judge just put in writing permanently that your brother lied, forged a legal document, and violated his duty to his own family, she said. What happens next with the prosecutor isn't in our hands anymore, but financially, professionally, and in that courtroom record, he's already lost. Word travels fast in a small business community. Within a month, 2 of Marcus's dealership's biggest lenders pulled their financing lines after the forgery finding became part of the public court record. A local paper ran a small item about the case under a headline that made my stomach twist and settle at the same time. Family trust dispute ends in forgery finding. He never called to apologize. I didn't expect him to. Men like Marcus don't apologize. They recalibrate, looking for the next angle, the next story that makes them the reasonable one. But Renee called, 3 weeks after the ruling, her voice different than I'd heard it in years. Lighter somehow, like she'd been holding her breath since that dinner table and had finally let it out. "I'm sorry I waited so long," she said. "I should have told the truth the day he handed me that paper." "You told the truth when it counted," I said. "That's what mattered." "Do you think we can ever be a family again? The 2 of us, I mean, not him." I looked around my apartment, at the framed photo on my shelf of Dad on that porch, coffee cup in hand, squinting into the morning sun. "I think we already are," I said. "We just have to build it different this time." My real share of the trust, once the shortfall and interest were added back in, came to just over $140,000. It wasn't the house. It was never going to be the house. But it was enough, along with my savings, to put a down payment on a small brick bungalow with a covered porch, the kind Dad would have appreciated for exactly what it was: solid, unglamorous, built to last. I kept 2 things from that manila envelope of documents: a copy of the original trust and my father's letter, the one that found me exactly when I needed it. I had the letter framed and hung it in my new hallway, right where I see it every morning on my way out the door. I drove past the old house once, months later. New owners had already repainted the shutters a color my mother never would have chosen. I sat in my car for a minute, waiting for the wave of grief I expected. It didn't come the way I thought it would. What came instead was quieter, a kind of settling. The house had been the last physical piece of them, but it was never the only piece. The letter in my hallway, the Sunday visits I never regretted, the version of my father who trusted me enough to leave a paper trail back to the truth, that was the part nobody could sell out from under me. Marcus lost the dealership 18 months later, the forgery finding, following him into every loan application and business relationship he tried to rebuild. I heard he moved 2 states away. I don't know if he's found peace with what he did. That's not mine to carry anymore. Renee and I have dinner every other Sunday now at her place. No lawyers, no percentages, no locked drawers of paperwork. Her kids call me Aunt Dana in a voice that doesn't know any of this history, and some days I'm grateful for that more than anything else. I still think about that first night, sitting on my kitchen floor with my father's stolen house lighting up a stranger's Facebook post. I thought I'd lost the last piece of him that mattered. I hadn't. He'd made sure of that quietly, years before he ever knew he'd need to. Some inheritances aren't measured in square footage. Mine turned out to be a single sentence, folded into an old cigar box, waiting for someone who'd pay attention. He was right. I always was.